Hey everyone. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to test your gateway. And of course, the first question first is, why do we even care? Like, why would we want to test our gateway? I mean, all it does is route one request to another Java app. We don't really want to test Spring framework for them, do we? No, we don't. We don't test libraries, but very often in your gateway, you'll have quite a bit of custom logic that involves some custom filters, and you might want to check that indeed when your filter, when you route some request and maybe let's say some required header is missing, that your filters correctly throw, reject the request. So the way you want to do it is, obviously when tests are running, you don't have this, you don't have anything running on this port, and that's where your requests will fail for any integration test. So to be able to actually do the integration test, you need your mock server. And for that, there are quite a few dependencies out there. I'm just going to grab this one. That's called mock server netty. I find it quite nice and easy to use. So once you've added these two dependencies, do refactor the property. I find it always a good practice, especially since in this case it's in two places that we can regulate this one. Then just refresh your project and you should be good to go. So once you've added the dependencies, we can now start writing our test. We'll first start with a simple test. So obviously we do need our we do want our Spring Boot to start, so we can have a real integration test. Then I'm gonna make this static client and like the mock server, and the reason for that is because, well, I want to be able to refer to it in before all and after all methods of JUnit, and that is why exactly. And that's why, and since those are static, I need this to be static as well. That's the only reason. And if you remember correctly, in our domain, we want to navigate booking service to 8081. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We can close this by now. So we start the server at 8081, and we also want, after our tests are run, after all, we want to stop the server, and for that we'll do some, exactly, thank you very much. And tests routing to booking service happy pass, for example. It doesn't really matter how you call it. And here the first thing you want to do is write just mock your mock server so that it actually gives a response. Also, I actually like a lot Gherkin syntax, given when then. So every single test has, you probably have heard about it already, it's 3 stages basically. One is setup, which in Gherkin syntax is given. Another one is an action, where you actually do something you want to test. Another one and the third part is assertion. So setup can be optional. You don't always have to provide the setup. Sometimes you can just right away go to the when, but when and then are pretty much there for every test. When I do something, then I get this. So what I do here is, given I have mocked the server, and these are very useful if tomorrow some other developer comes and needs to understand what you're even trying to do, because tests are sometimes hard to read. So when I do this, and I will do something like import static method. And I'll provide the path that I'm trying to, so that I want to stub a response for, again 1 2 3 4. Then respond with, let's throw this to a new line. I want a response to HTTP response, and just some, I don't know, dummy response. Oops, exactly. So given I've mocked the server, or stub, I've, let's say, mocked an endpoint. When I when I call booking endpoint, I correct, and you can write when and then on the same line, which is what I'm going to do here. Then I get the OK response. Yeah, and that's all there is to it. So that's my web test client. I grab it, like I define, oh yeah, it was a nice suggestion. I wanna send this to here, I wanna exchange, I wanna expect status, that is okay, exactly. So as you see here, that's all we're doing is we've defined our server to start. We're mocking that when we call this endpoint, we get the dummy response, and then I'm just checking that the response is okay. And if I run it right now, it will not surprisingly work exactly as it is expected, or surprisingly won't. Why did this happen? Did I not define my endpoints? Or did I write it wrong? Oh, bookings, right. So that was just, well, another good reason to check. So as you can see, it's defined here bookings plural, and in my test I wrote booking singular. So even one letter difference is obviously enough to get 404. And now it's all correctly. Indeed, we got a 200 response and our test works. Now, this test has one slight disadvantage, and namely, it has here, we've hard-coded the port 8081. Now, it's okay if you're just running your test locally and you're the only one who's doing it, but at work you will often have the case that you have Jenkins or some other build tool that runs tests for your branches often in parallel. So it very well can happen that you're running, for example, your feature branch and your develop branch, they both get updated, and then, or you have several feature branches, and some of them happen to run in parallel on the same Jenkins server. And then if they're running in parallel, of course, the first branch that starts executing tests will grab the port, and the second one will fail, and then you will all, because the port is already taken. So it will be like connection refused exception. And if some pipeline fails with connection refused exception, it's just annoying. Everyone gets an email, everyone has to waste time and take a look, and it's just a stupid, test is written, let's say, in a not optimal way. So now that you've seen how it can be written like this, I'll just create a second class. Let's call this application, I don't know, let's call it 2, test 2. I'm sure you can find better names for it. And now I'm just doing it so you have both options. And now you can take a look at how I'm gonna do it basically. And so what I'm trying to actually achieve here is not hard code this into 8081, but instead just like base it on, also kind of grabs a random port. Now this dependency doesn't have a random port, not that I know of, and even if it did, I mean, we would still need to know which port it is. So that's why, well, my little workaround for this is I'm gonna create here my own component, and we're gonna call it our test config, very imaginative name. And I'm gonna define here an event listener that listens to a web server initialized event, exactly, and voids, initialize mock server, doesn't really matter how I call it. And first of all, I will grab the port that we started at, port equals event exactly. And second of all, I will start my mock server, but obviously I cannot use the port that my application started at because this port is already taken. But thankfully, this method accepts actually an array of integers of ports, and it just grabs the ones that it can use. So I will go with port +1, port +2, port +3. So here I'm saying just grab in, like our application is going to start at a random port, and I'm saying, okay, just grab one of the next 3 ones that happens to be free. Well, for sure, at least one of the 3 ones will be free. That shouldn't be a problem. So now our server is starting here. Every time this web server gets initialized, our server also gets initialized, and that is, of course, quite nice. Now, here I will import this test configuration so that we can actually I was expecting it to help me, but okay. Then testconfig.class. So now I'm importing it. And since I'm importing it, this event listener will get activated, and then it will correctly initialize the mock server at the start. So that's already good. And now, but that doesn't solve all of our problems. What do I mean? We now are starting our mock server at a random port +1. So at some other random port. But if you remember correctly, our configurations don't just shoot for a random port. They go to a very specific domain, which is 8081. Now, what I would like to do ideally in my tests is update my configuration, update my YAML to no longer go to 8081, but instead go to that specific port that I started with. And thankfully, there's actually a pretty comfortable method for it. So first, there's gateway properties class, which loads all your properties that you define in YAML. And you can update those properties with emitting an event, and maybe there's a more elegant way of doing it. But so if you guys know any more interesting ways, please do let me know. But I'm just sharing with you what I came up with. So we have our gateway properties. Now I wanna go ahead and update my get routes. Let's just maybe filter if I can. Stream filter. Yeah, that sounds good. Stream filter. Let's just find the route that route.get. I mean, ideally you want to grab the ones that you're actually interested in, and we know that its ID is booking route. So .get ID equals booking route, and then I will do for each route, because it's an object, route.setURI, and I will set it to HTTP. No, wait, URI is an object, not a string. I mean, string is also an object, but it's not a simple string. So yeah, exactly, just without this. So I hope I'm not doing it too fast or too complicated. Basically, it's honestly kind of simple. I'll explain it in a sec. Yeah, so what am I doing here? I'm going through all the routes. I'm filtering to find the route that has the ID that I'm looking for, and then I'm updating it to from what it had, because its URI was, if you remember, HTTP localhost 8081, and I'm updating it to localhost and the ports that we're actually using for our mock server. Also, actually, yeah, we could have just done this. Would have also worked. So maybe we don't need this variable. But yeah, something like this will work just fine. So now we've updated it, but we want to tell Spring, hey, by the way, please tell your whole route locators to re-update, to reread the gateway properties. And the way we can do that is just by publishing this event. It's just a refresh rounds events, and as soon as I do it, it's it updates all the events. So given I've mocked an endpoint, and I updated my routes. Let's keep those two lines together, but so it's all one big update. When I call booking endpoints, then I get the OK response. And now we can try running it and see if our whole configuration runs correctly. And it does. So again, what did we do? We had our mock server. We created our own component, which listens to the web server being initialized and then runs mock server on the corresponding port. And then we updated our routes to go to that specific port on localhost and not just any route. And the whole idea behind it was to make our tests a bit more robust, so they don't break every time there's a different feature running, different branch running in parallel. So yeah, that was it. Hope it was useful, and see you next time.